I wanted to share my journey of my eating disorder because I found that it's very empowering when you can hear from other people who have recovered. And part of that journey is telling you my story of pregnancy from someone who's recovered from an eating disorder. And I think it's important to share this because this was something that always worried me, and it was always in the back of my head, knowing my history, that I went through years fixated on what my weight was and always worried about gaining weight. And of course, we all know that with pregnancy, weight gain is inevitable. And that was always a concern in the back of my head, even years after being recovered from eating disorder, that would it cause some of those same thoughts and behaviors to kind of pop back into my life. So I wanted to share my story, and I am just 3 weeks out after having my second son. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll share the little guy here, but he's 3 weeks old, and he's my second son. And my journey from my first pregnancy to my second was very different, and I want to share that with you. So I had my first son a little over 3 years ago, and at the time I was going through a lot of stress. We were building a house. I had just changed jobs. I had just moved to a different state with my husband. We moved into my parents' house temporarily while we were building the house with 3 dogs. I was pregnant, you name it. There was just so much going on at that time. And to say that I was stressed would be an understatement. I was not even myself looking back at it. I felt like I was a shell of myself, just going through the motions of each day. I was working full-time plus a part-time job. My full-time job, I was traveling an hour to get to work. And then I was working my part-time job on other hours that I wasn't working my full-time job. So I had a lot going on. I would go home and essentially we would be working on the house all weekend, working on the house. And when I had my son, we were still working on the house. The project that we anticipated that would take about 9 months ended up taking about 1.5 years. And for anyone who's built a home, you know that if you think it's going to cost you a certain amount, it always costs you more. So just wanted to kind of paint a picture of the amount of stress that I was under when I had my first son. So stress plays a big role in eating disorders for sure, in pain, in essentially every aspect of your life. And if you have a good strategy for helping yourself, you can mitigate some of that stress. If you don't have a good strategy, it will wreak havoc on you. And at that time, it did. And going through my first pregnancy, I had terrible back pain. And for anyone who's followed my story, I had an eating disorder for about 6 years. And then subsequent to that eating disorder, I suffered from chronic back pain for several years. I was able to recover from that back pain fully and never really had any exacerbation until I had this stress about 3 years ago. So just want to paint a picture as far as what stress can actually do. I mean, I literally was pain-free for years, and then the pain came right back when I was going through all this stress. And hindsight, I'm thankful for those times, but during it, it was awful. I mean, it was just awful to go through all that. And, you know, kind of looking back, I really missed out on being fully present when my son was first born because of all that stress. And I wouldn't do it again, but it really taught me a big lesson with this second one, how to handle stress better, how to set barriers and boundaries for myself, and how to fully be present. And I had a much better experience this time. But so going back to recovering from an eating disorder and then having gone through a pregnancy, weight gain was definitely a concern as far as kind of being triggering for me with some of the eating disorder behaviors. And, I didn't know how that was going to go. I kind of just rolled with it. And I would say kind of on the second trimester, as you start gaining a little bit more weight, it was always in the back of my mind, but I never really felt the way I did when I was going through an eating disorder. I never really felt like it was controlling me. And I think the big thing with that is that when you're going through an eating disorder, the behaviors that you engage in, so for me, it was excessively eating, excessively exercising, then restricting calories. Those were all symptoms of what was going on deeper. So there was a lot of self-criticism. There was the feeling of perfectionism, that I was just never good enough, trying to live up to an unachievable standard, and having this just negative mindset of myself. Like if I talk that way to anyone else in my life, no one would be around me. But for some reason, talking to myself negatively was all I knew, and just didn't serve me. Looking back on it, it really puts you in a very dark place, and really does not move you forward in anything that you're trying to achieve. And it's easy to see that now when you're out of it, but in the thick of it, you know no other way other than doing that, because in a weird way, it gives you comfort. So after going through my first pregnancy, I really noticed that I wasn't experiencing a lot of those terrible mindsets that I had during the eating disorder. And for me, it was really quite empowering, because I realized how recovered I was, that here I am, gaining weight, which is a healthy thing to do during pregnancy, of course. And I wasn't experiencing the negative talk that I had during my first pregnancy, during the eating disorder. And that to me was really a huge sign of recovery, that, I can go through these huge changes in my body, a lot of stress, and I still didn't feel like I was anywhere near where I was, 10 years prior. So to me, that's just an amazing thing. And I wanted to share that because that was a huge concern for me when I was going through my eating disorder, that how would pregnancy impact me? So I really think it's a testament that recovery is possible, and you can live a life without being consumed by every single calorie you put in your body or every number on the scale. It really is possible. So I wanted to share that. Going back to that first pregnancy, I had, previously stated that I had terrible back pain, and that is true. And that for me was a wake-up call as far as what I needed to do, because like I said, I had suffered from chronic back pain for years, and this was the first bout that I had that was pretty paralyzing at the time. So for me, it made me recognize that I had to do more for myself to help myself get out of that. And I really contribute the intense amounts of stress to why my back pain was so awful. And I will admit, at that time, I had no tools in place to help manage my stress or put myself in a better mindset. I really didn't. And it really showed up in my body, which it tends to do. And I've talked about this in many podcasts and through a lot of my messaging, but chronic pain and eating disorders are completely interrelated because of the amounts of stimulus they put on the sympathetic nervous system. So essentially, when you're in a heightened amount of stress chronically, your nervous system goes into protective mode and essentially creates this increased tension, increased pain sensitivity. It causes inflammation, chronic inflammation, which then has secondary consequences to it. Your fascia becomes more taut. So the actual integrity of your fascia, which is your connective tissue, changes its properties. So there were so many things that I recognize in hindsight were going on and contributing to my back pain. And fortunately, I was able to overcome that, and I don't have any back pain now. And I didn't probably a few months after that time, because I started implementing the tools that I knew to implement to get myself in a better place. But that's why it's so important that when you're having these exacerbations of pain, to have tools in place and recognize what you can do to help yourself in that situation. And I was not the best role model of that back in that time. And I recognize it now that what I needed to put in place to get myself into a better position. And fast forward to now, going through my second pregnancy, it was a much harder pregnancy for me physically. It was very draining, a lot of nausea, a lot of discomfort, but I can say that I went through this pregnancy without the pain that I had in my first pregnancy. And I really attribute that to better tools in place to manage stress. And, not to say I didn't have the stressors I had then, I had a different set of stressors that were going on in my life now. But the difference is that I recognized them and I implemented tools to help myself get into a better place mentally, physically, emotionally, and really serve my nervous system so it wasn't getting into that chronic heightened response. So that's really what I attribute my lack of pain with this pregnancy toward. I also had a much better labor. And I think a lot of that too is the tools that I had in place. I was prepared for it. I was prepared for allowing myself to have this place of calm to get to, and knowing what I needed to do before, during, and after, so that I didn't experience what I had experienced previously. So having tools, I can't say it enough, really is the biggest thing you can do, and using them consistently and using them when you need them, and knowing that you have everything you need within yourself to help yourself. It's just kind of being directed in that way. And I like to use the analogy of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, because again, she had her ruby slippers with her the entire time, and she literally could have gone home at any moment. She just didn't know the power that was in those slippers throughout the whole movie. And it's the same thing with you. If you recognize the power you have to help your nervous system, to help yourself feel calm and in a better place, then you're able to do that at any point. It's just knowing how to use those tools. And that really is the biggest thing. And for sure, this pregnancy was much more pleasant as far as the lack of pain. It was a tough pregnancy, not to say it wasn't, but as far as the back pain, I did not experience that. And I really think it was attributed again to the tools and listening to my body and knowing kind of where my limits were and what I should be doing. So, and I think the biggest thing too is that when you're gaining weight during pregnancy, the perspective is different. So I recognize the amazing ability for my body to grow another human. I think it's fascinating. I thought it was amazing the first time, and I was just as amazed by it the second time. And I think you can really look outside yourself and really appreciate all that there is to be grateful for. First and foremost, I was grateful that I was able to be pregnant. Very grateful to be able to grow two beautiful boys. And I think having that gratitude and recognizing how amazing the body is in its ability to do that and its function, that is such an amazing perspective shift. Thinking back when I was going through the eating disorder, I was always focused on what I looked like. I didn't really appreciate what my body was doing for me. And that really is such a shift. Back when I was in the thick of my eating disorder, excessive exercise was really my biggest coping mechanism for the majority of it. And, I was running miles upon miles, lifting weights 3 times a day at the gym. Really putting my body through the works, day in and day out. I went 2.5 years without missing one night of doing 500 sit-ups. And that just was kind of like that obsessive compulsive thing. Looking back at it, did it benefit me to do 500 sit-ups? No. But at the time, I was so obsessed with the numbers and so obsessed with holding myself to an unachievable standard that nothing else mattered. And I did all that to look a certain way. And I did not appreciate what my body actually was doing for me. The fact that it could move me up and down these roads and hills and participate in sports and lift the weights that I was doing and just be able to move to the excessive amounts that I was moving. I never appreciated what it was able to do. And now looking back, my gosh, it was amazing what my body allowed me to do when I was doing that. But again, I didn't look at that. It was all about aesthetic appeal and looking a certain way. Now I have such an appreciation for what my body does. And I recognize that I have to be grateful for it every day because it does amazing things for us. And it really is our advocate. And if we can shift our minds to recognize that perspective, I think that's just so profound. And I think why I say it's kind of like it's absolutely a blessing to go through all the struggles I've gone through, because it really has allowed me to appreciate what my body is capable of, and to basically to think about it, I essentially abused my body through the eating disorder, even though that wasn't obviously my intention. It was a side effect of what I had going on mentally, and my body took a lot of abuse at that time because I just used it to its limit time and time again. And for it to bounce back, after years of doing that, and through recovery, and to be able to grow two beautiful humans, it is just amazing. And I have such a great appreciation for what my body was able to do, and really the function, focusing on the function and what it does for you day in and day out. I really think that is such an important thing to recognize. Moving into kind of my postpartum recovery, of course, the big thing is being able to use your body again. When I, was towards the end of pregnancy, movement was really tough for me. And that became challenging because I do find comfort in moving my body, and not say that I didn't, but to the extent that I was able to towards the end of the pregnancy. So now again, I'm learning to listen to my body. What is it telling me? How do I feel? And kind of teetering on that line of where I need to be, not excessively, but again, just trying to recoup my body and allow it to strengthen itself. And when I say recuperate, it's not a focus of let me get the weight off or let me get myself looking a certain way. Of course, the biggest thing for me is get my strength back and get feeling good. I want to feel good again, where I can move and move freely. And that is my biggest focus here. So again, it's not about the aesthetic appeal. It's not about how I look. It's about feeling a certain way. And that really is such a transition from where I was as well. So if this helps anyone, I wanted to share this because I was in such a place where literally for years, I never even thought about having kids because the thought of being pregnant was so distasteful to me, strictly because of the weight gain. So I really limited myself and even thinking about ever having kids, because to me, that was off the table that I would ever gain weight to have a child. And that literally was my mindset, is probably about 10 to 15 years ago when I had gone through the eating disorder. And I think back on that and I just recognize how much I would have missed out on if I allowed that limiting belief and that and allow my eating disorder to take control of me for any longer than it did. I would have missed out on the two best things in my life, which are my two sons. And hands down, this has just been a complete blessing to have them here, to be able to enjoy every moment with them and really have them here to bring joy to my life. And if I didn't get myself in a better place where I allowed myself to accept myself for who I am and allowed myself to recover and change my mindset, I would have missed out on the two best things in my life. And for anyone who, depending on whatever stage you're in, if you're in the thick of your eating disorder, I wanted to share this because it is completely possible to recover and get yourself into a place where you can fully enjoy life and not be tethered by the constant thoughts of what an eating disorder does to you. If you're recovering right now, keep going, because again, you are setting yourself up for a beautiful life. And every struggle that you have gone through or are going through right now will become your strength later on. It will be your voice and it will help you move through life. So nothing is in vain. Every struggle that we go through teaches us something to help us become stronger at some point in our life. So I am completely grateful for my struggles that I went through for years, because it has allowed me to see life from a different perspective. And I hope for anyone who's going through that, you recognize that you too will be able to see your life from a different perspective. And I truly believe there's so much to be grateful for every struggle. And just recognize, again, it's not a linear journey. There will be setbacks. And even for me, there were points when I had to check in with my mindset, because it is always in there. There's always times when you kind of things pop up, or you start critiquing yourself, or you just feel like you have a negative emotion towards yourself. It doesn't go away forever. At least for me, it hasn't. But the difference is that I can check myself and rationally tell myself, like, this is not going to help you get to where you need to be. And that is the biggest thing. So, realistically, again, it is in there, it's in your head at some point, but to the point that it controls your life is so far significantly different. And for me, I'm not held back by my eating disorder like I was. I felt like it controlled every aspect of my life. Now I view it, like I said, as a strength to help me propel myself forward and in my purpose, and to be a good role model for my children, and hopefully inspire others to get to a place where they can also enjoy what life has to offer, and recognize there's so much more than an eating disorder. There really is. So if you found value in this, please share, comments below, share with others who may be able to find value in this. And I really hope it serves you to understand that there really is the ability to recover, and beautiful things can come from that. So enjoy your day, and take care.